I quit my job in June, I think.
June 2020 or?
June 2019.
2019, okay.
And January was when I realized, wait, maybe I can actually do this full time. And that was like a surprise for me because I've never considered myself to be cut out for freelance because I despise the business side of things. And I actually realized that the reason why I despised it was simply because I didn't know much about it.
The Perspective Podcast is fuel for your mind and creative grind. Each week, we break down the art of healthy hustling, overcoming the inner critic, and growing your creative business.
PC family, we welcome Belinda Kou on the show. Today, welcome to the Perspective Podcast. How have you been?
I've been good. How are you?
Good. I feel like most of our chatting has just been like on the interwebs. We met at a conference before, right though?
No, just the interwebs for us.
Just the interwebs. Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like I've known you for so long.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years now, so it's easy to forget it's not been in person.
Right. And I'm not big on like people pitching to be a guest on the podcast. Like that always makes me feel kind of weird, but I'm more like behind the scenes and I'm headhunting people. You know, I'm studying people, whether I meet them at a conference or like I get introduced to them via the interwebs. And I have just been like watching you from afar, studying you. We've connected via email, on Instagram. And I knew a little bit about your story and just seeing your creative career just like blast off and the audience that you've been building around you and your freelance game. It's so inspiring. I felt like, you are the perfect fit to come and talk and share your story today. So for those who may not know a little bit about you, just give us a brief Wikipedia page summary about yourself, and then I'm going to be diving into the story.
Okay. So I'm Belinda Kou. I'm a lettering artist, illustrator, and mom of two little girls based in Chicago. My work consists of a lot of food-inspired art, and I have a slight obsession with drawing noodles and colorful things. Since taking the leap to freelance almost 2 years ago, I've been able to create work for clients like NPR, Coach, and Trader Joe's. And I've had a very nonlinear career path and had to learn a lot on my own. So that's why I've started to share tips on Instagram to new lettering artists to help them to level up their skills without feeling overwhelmed.
How many times do you practice this elevator pitch?
Like 3 times, maybe.
All
I wrote
right.
it down. Now I'm reading it. So
Friends and folks, like that is an elevator pitch. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Okay. So this show is comprised of a lot of people just grinding outside of their day job, trying to make shit happen for themselves. And again, this is how you originally sprung up on my radar. I'm like, oh, wow, mom just like grinding it, trying to build this freelance career. So I want you to like go deeper, tell this fascinating story about how you've made this transition to full-time freelance, but you were juggling a day job as well as like 2 kiddos and then bringing the pandemic and everything going on. So yeah, take us back.
All right. So how far back do we need to go?
How about when you just got started? Maybe it was like a hobby in the first place, and then like the next steps, or when did you start seeing like there's a glimpse of this could turn into something? When you started gaining traction, when you took the scary leap,
okay,
all of it. Just take us back.
All right. So a brief overview of previous to my last job. I was formerly a middle school teacher teaching science, and I had a degree in biopsych, and it just pushed me eventually into graphic design. So, my background has been really different from where I am today, but I kind of was able to always identify in each step of the way that I was really interested in drawing in the background, like behind the scenes, just everything that I was doing, anything art related, that always popped up. So my first little leap that I took was a career change from teaching to graphic design. And then when I was in graphic design, my next sort of shift was after I had my first kid. So that was 5 years ago. I realized that I wasn't feeling as creatively fulfilled at my job as I wanted to. A lot of the work that we're doing was, design stuff and using stock imagery and things like that. And lettering just wasn't a good fit for the client base that we had. So I realized, if I can't do lettering at work, there's nothing holding me back from doing lettering outside of work. So I just started to do that.
This was 5 years ago?
It was about 5 years ago. And it started out as a hobby. It was a personal challenge for me where I decided if I'm constantly saying I like lettering, but I'm not showing any of it, why not just start doing it? And I started an Instagram account for that, just separate from my personal, to throw artwork on there and make it a little bit more public so that I had more accountability from just my friends who were following me to see, hey, I'm creating artwork. I'm not just talking about it, I'm actually doing it. And I started off with a 100-day lettering challenge where it was just me trying to overcome my perfectionist tendencies of holding on to artwork for way too long. For me at that time, it was like years of me holding on to the same project and just cranking out a piece a day. Like you only have 24 hours to do it. So there is no time for you to be a perfectionist. And that actually really helped to break that first barrier of perfectionism for me to create in a more prolific way, as opposed to, you know, a once a year project. So should I keep going? Yeah. So after that, what happened after that? So I had my 100-day lettering project, which got me into Instagram and just learning how to share work on Instagram.
How difficult was it to stick with it? And then what were the results by the end of it? Because I get so many people talking about like perfectionism. This week, a theme with my students and their check-ins, my coaching program, like perfectionism is like there, and it makes them hold off on hitting their deadlines. They get too precious about their work, trying to make things 110%. So like, this is money to talk about right now.
Yeah. So I started off with a small goal. It was, let's letter for 7 days. And once I hit 7 days, I realized that was actually a lot easier than I thought. Let's do another 7. And then it turned into 21 days because it's like, it takes 21 days to build a habit. So it's like 21 days. By the time I reached 21 days, I realized, you know what, I think I can actually push it to 100. And it sounds like a really nice, even number. So let's just do it. I would say after that, it was difficult to keep going because there were days where you're just too busy, or, you know, weeks where you just don't have any ideas. But what helped me to push through that first exercise was, one, I think batching stuff in advance helped. So there would be moments where you take advantage of that energy and motivation that you have. So rather than just creating one piece that weekend, maybe you're creating 5 and you're set for a few days for those days when you're like,
each one? Like
anywhere from 10 minutes, like really quick, to 3 hours, I think some of them took. Yeah. So it kind of varied based on the, you know, what I was working on that day.
So by the end of the 100 days, what were the benefits? What was the transformation? What did you see aside from being like not being scared to put out imperfect work?
Yeah. So it got me into the groove of making it more of a habit as opposed to waiting for inspiration to strike, because I think there is a balance that you need, especially if you're doing this as a job, to be able to, you know, take advantage of those moments where you have those creative highs. And then how do you push through those moments when you have the creative lows and you still have to create work for clients? So it was a good building block skill.
That's what we talk about here, is going from the mindset of hobbyist to professional. Hobbyists, I like to call hobbyists like toddlers. You do things when it feels good. You know, it's like my son. My son is a hobbyist. You know, he just wants to play with Play-Doh in the moment when that shit feels good. I want to color when it feels good. But a professional is like, yo, I need to show up and build this habit because it's about something bigger in the long run. So that's exactly what I'll say. So habit building, overcoming perfectionism. I'm sure you probably like really learned how to manage your time outside of your day job and family life really well.
Yes. Yeah. So I had this mentality this past year too, now that I had this extra shift with the pandemic, but originally I had kind of that victim mindset of, I don't have time for this because I have my day job. My commute was pretty long too. So I was basically gone 11 hours each day, just from leaving the house and coming back. And then I had my kids. So I felt like I had no time until I would tell people who were rooting me on. And they were like, actually, Belinda, you have maybe at least each day an hour or two to do stuff. And if you add that up, I mean, like 5 days a week, 2 hours, that's 10 hours. That's like a Netflix series that you can binge watch. That's a lot that you can do in there. So it helped me to realize that by talking to people, and then kind of putting in an intentional way of planning out those hours and how can I get the most out of it. So for example, maybe 2 to 3 days each week, I would be really in creation mode and just like excited about ideas that were generating throughout the day when I was at work. I would funnel all of that into my time after work for like across 3 nights just to create something. And then the other 2 nights could be me working on answering emails and stuff with freelance, like more of the business admin stuff.
And how husband and communication and all that stuff, because was the hard thing for me in the beginning. I was just
Yeah.
like tunnel vision, obsessed. And I'm
Mhm.
like, no, I'm boxing you out. And now I'm like, oh, that was bad for me.
Yeah, I think there's like a trial period where you just kind of have to figure it out, because every time there's a shift in our schedule where it's, me quitting my job and adjusting it, and then the pandemic happening and us figuring out childcare balance, there's like a trial period where you have to figure it out. We had those moments too, though, where like if I get into tunnel vision and suddenly I realize, oh, half a day went by and my husband was watching the kids all day. He's exhausted.
And I'm over
How do
here
we
drawing
kind of
noodles.
switch that? Yeah.
No, that's
for
great.
good reason.
I want to get to like the food part first. Mm-hmm. So, but first I want to talk about like that transition. When were you just like, okay, now I got something here. There's some demand. When did you start seeing demand, and when were you like, okay, it's time to take the leap?
Yeah, it was quicker than I thought. I take years to make decisions. So this was a quick one for me. I would say it took me about a year process to go through the whole thing. There was starting to become more demand for freelance. I was getting more into lettering and realizing that lettering could actually become something that maybe was beyond a hobby, but never really I'm going to freelance full time. I don't think I actually realized that was a possibility for me until January, before I quit in June. I quit my job in June, I think.
June 2020 or
June 2019.
2019, okay.
And January was when I realized, wait, maybe I can actually do this full time. And that was like a surprise for me, because I've never considered myself to be cut out for freelance, because I despise the business side of things. And I actually realized that the reason why I despised it was simply because I didn't know much about it, like a lack of knowledge, as opposed to me not being made that way. So the more I learned about it, the more interested I got. And January of 2019 was when I realized that maybe I could actually do this full time. And my husband and I, we had this thing where we take at least a quarter of a year to make big decisions like that. So 3 months was the amount of time that I spent deciding, is this something that I want to do soon, like right now, or is it something that I want to wait a little bit later to transition to? Like maybe we should build up more savings in our finances before I took that leap. And eventually the conclusion from January to March was, actually, that's not the thing that's holding me back. It's not the finances. It's simply me being scared that if I do it, I might fail. So if that's the only reason, then just do it.
And if you're like me, when I was on the edge of like taking the leap, mine was at the end of 2019 when I lost my job. I'm like, oh my God, what if it fails? What if lose the house and my family's kicked onto the street and homeless and I lose my family? It's like, no, just go get a day job.
Get another job. Yeah. Right? I think that's something that you forget.
Such a hard thing for me to be like, what if I fail?
Yeah.
But also I would never tell someone, like, if you don't have the demand built up, you don't necessarily have like a savings or 3 to 6 months of expenses. You don't have your time management and everything down, your project management, how to like treat your own self, like hire yourself as a boss, with your side hustle. If you don't have all those things in place, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to be ready to go to freelance, because you're going to set yourself up for defeat. And then you're going to think like, man, I didn't have what it took. I'm like, no, you never gave yourself a fair shot.
Yeah.
I feel like you built the runway for it. By that 100-day project, set the tone for what you're doing now in terms of time management, project management, planning, execution, being okay with just like letting go and posting 85% perfect or 85% done work kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like when you are severely limited in time, you get okay with posting 75%.
Right? It's like having a day job or time constraints forces you to like be more intentional with the limited amount of time you have. Like I had a student Wilmar, and he was just in the last coaching program in fall. He just had 15 minutes a day outside of a crazy work schedule, like a 12-hour work day, online education for his daughters, having to be home. And he still just rocked 15, 30 minutes a day and crushed it. So I'm like, people just are looking for that excuse. Cause I think at the end of the day, it's like, what if it doesn't work? What if all this time I've invested is for nothing? I'm like, it's going to lead to something. It'll always lead to something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if anything, it's building up skills for you. So
yeah, and
really
that'll carry
helpful
over to your next pursuit, whatever it is. So tips on how to combat the overwhelm of juggling multiple responsibilities. This seems like this is an area I thrive in, and I thought it was just like a natural thing, but clearly this is something you thrive in as well. So I would love to know kind of like the tips of how you've learned how to juggle all these multiple things, Superman syndrome, as well as having to be a killer mom, as well as a wifey, and just life in general, along with your creative pursuits?
Yeah. So I think my biggest area of overwhelm is always this, like, I feel like I lack time. And as I'm going through, these different time constraints in my life, you kind of realize it's not really a lack of time that you're experiencing. It's more just, what do you do in the time that you have, and how can you be efficient in that time and also really love that time? So, some ways that I've been kind of combating the overwhelm is, okay, well, if I only have a couple of hours each day to create as opposed to a full day, like a full-time person, what can I do with that time? So if I'm making, it takes me a pretty long time to make my work, at least 8 hours, I'd say, for some of my pieces, because I really like detailed work. That means I can't post like 3 original artworks every single week. And I don't think anybody really has time to do that. That's pretty draining. So figuring out how to repurpose your content and share your content in different contexts so that you're presenting it not just for yourself, but also for clients. Those are really great ways to take a piece of content and just completely stretch it out and milk it for all it's worth. Because you took a lot of time and dedication to create that thing, and you were probably carving it outside of, your day job. You should let people see that and
There's
repost.
Multiple angles you can take something, repurposing and distribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make that breathe more life into that single piece. So give us an example. This is something I really work on with students. Take it small first. Let's just get one piece of content out there, get that normalized in your routine. And then let's take on the next part. Instead of having to go create another piece, like, let's make that thing live in a different angle. So how does this work for you in your work?
So for example, I just wrapped up a side project series of 18 pieces. And it was something that I distributed across about 5 months. It's called Hungrily Ever After. It's like this colorful series of food, lettering, and fairy tales, and just kind of remixing it in different and funny ways. And I took that piece. So I would take one piece and then share that. And the angle of that is just looking at the artwork and the lettering styles and detail shots of that. And then you can share again in a mock-up of a book cover, because that is something that I would like to do from the series, is just, work with book publishers and create book cover illustrations. So share it in that context, so that if somebody were to come to your Instagram and they see your grid, they don't just see one single piece, they see the piece and they see book covers just straight up on the cup, on your grid. And then you can also share it again by taking process shots and showing behind the scenes to share with your audience on how you created that piece. So in one given piece of artwork, you have at least 3 items or 3 ways to share it in telling the story in different ways.
And in your approach, do you find it best to like trickle this, like say you have a week for your content calendar that week? Is it like a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or do you spread it out mixed within all your other content? So does it live as like a triptych within your week, or is it just like sprinkled in between your other content?
So it kind of depends on how much content I already have or how much content I have planned. In an ideal situation, it would be sprinkled across a few weeks as opposed to like a triptych, because I feel like it gives you more flexibility to adjust your deadlines when things happen and you have to, cater to a bigger priority, like a client project drops, you don't have time to create that thing. So I like to spread it out.
So how do you manage your time now? What's a typical day look like for you?
For the pandemic.
Yeah, just like your current business now, being at home daycare provider, and as well as wearing all these hats, how do you manage your time throughout the day? What's your current schedule look like? You had to carve out time to jump on this call.
Yeah. So my current schedule basically looks like I'm with the girls for about 11 hours in a given day. So from about 9:30 to what's 11 hours? Like 9:30 to 8:30 is like childcare time. For the most part, during that chunk of time, I am still able to jump on calls occasionally, shift things around like meetings and answering emails and stuff. So I can fit in some of that time, but I double down on the time before that, like in the morning. So I try to wake up really early. It doesn't always work out. My goal is always 6, but lately I've been snoozing like crazy. So like 6:30, 7 o'clock is when I get up.
Shame.
I know you shouldn't be snoozing. And I don't know if like this happens to you, but every time I try to like turn off my phone, I take screenshots. So I've got like a ton of screenshots of my alarm at 6 a.m.
That's like your intuition, the universe being like, yo, Belinda, get your shit together. We're going to just keep taking photos of your bloopers,
Yeah, just here's direct proof that you did not get up today. So I'm trying to learn not to snooze, and I've been trying to set it up where I'll put my phone outside of our room. So I have to get out of like
Life
walk
hacking.
a distance. Yeah.
So how much time do you get in a day then, hours wise?
Hours wise for work, I can craft out about anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, depending on how the kids are that day and what else needs to get done. So that is like a given day. But if any big priorities, like big client projects drop in, that's when I shift and talk with my husband about childcare strategies so that I can get in a little bit more time for that.
So we live in a world where doing your thing self-employed is so overglorified. And people don't truly understand all the things that go behind the scenes, the admin work, the business, the communication, the non-glorious shit that it doesn't live on an Instagram feed. And the childcare, figuring out healthcare, whatever it is, like it's not easy. And would you agree? Not everyone's cut out for it. It takes a special breed of kind of person to like, who's able to roll with the punches and adapt. Like you have to be able to adapt to things and figure out new routines, but realize like you're going to get a wrench thrown in your routine. Every now and then you always have to constantly adapt to something new.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be really flexible and also good at putting in structure in your day too, and restructuring it when things like that happen.
What do you think like the toughest part for you has been? Because you've been doing this now a little over a year full time.
Yes. What would be the toughest part? I think for me, it's just your freelance business. For me, I kind of joke, it feels a little bit like a third baby, except it doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night and it doesn't give you hugs and kisses, but it's still a lot of work and something that you really love and care about. So that was a lesson for me, was just kind of realizing how much of freelance business is a mix of like you just like really loving it dearly, but also you needing to be a business person and put, food on the table, and finding that balance. Like when you have a job and you have a boss, you can kind of disconnect emotionally from it. But when you're running your own business, you're not disconnected emotionally from it. It
becomes your identity in a sense. It's really hard to break away.
It's really hard to break away. Yeah. And I think it's still important to break away from it because your freelance business still doesn't fully define who you are or like your worth. And the outcomes or the successes of your business shouldn't define that either. But it's really easy to confuse it when you're the one who's running it.
It's a lot of pressure. Your back is against the wall. Feels like every day. There's sometimes income isn't always promised a specific week or a specific month.
Yeah. Like when you're not getting that income flow, and there is an ebb and flow of freelance just naturally during those dry months, you just kind of feel like a useless blob sometimes. So yeah, you just have to fight against it.
How do you stay? I see you creating side projects, you create educational content. Like you are always on it. You're always in my feed. That's why you constantly remind me you exist. Hence, that's why you're always top of mind when I was like ready to schedule the next wave.
Yeah. So definitely the dry months is when I'll double down on those passion projects, because I feel like even though you most likely are taking that leap to freelance because you love it so much and you want to make a business out of it. But even though you are now doing freelance, you still want passion projects to kind of keep that creative excitement alive, because it's just not the same when you're doing client work versus you're doing something that's completely on your own. So I feel like it's really important still to have those side projects. So that's the time when I'll take advantage and try to crank out a few things just for myself, just for me to feel like, okay, yeah, I'm still making things for myself and I'm getting a lot of creative fulfillment out of it and able to share this with people who can also enjoy, that journey that I'm going on with that new skill that I'm trying to build. And then taking care of like business admin things.
It's purposeful play. And I think a huge thing I want to know, so many people get into this right away in the beginning and they're like, I got to start monetizing my stuff. I got to jump into freelance. I'm like, you haven't even figured out what you're good at, what you love to do. You haven't even found your sweet spot yet. And I feel for you went into it just because you love to letter and you couldn't do it elsewhere. So it's like, why not make time to do it? You weren't like going into it being like, I have to make this work for freelance. I talk about, instead of worrying about the external results of how do I make money and get opportunities from this, it's like, do the internal work, find what you really, really love to do. And then you mix in what I call your secret sauce, and you love food, and food has become a staple in what you do. And you found your groove, you found your style, you found something you're really good at, plus something you really love to do, which is what I call the sweet spot. And once you really hone into that and go all in that lane, the third part of that recipe is the market, the demand for it, the market and the demand, the opportunities come once you figure out over here. And then when you really find something you really love to do, then you're able to monetize it. Like the obsession and the passion, once you get to do your thing full time, is what drives you through. It's when you have these dry seasons, well, like, damn, this is just time for me to like go do some purposeful play now, add a new skill set, add a new angle, show different kind of work that I'd like to attract. So I think it just stems from, you have to borderline be obsessive and really, really love what you're doing and like have a drive to become really, really, really good at it and always learn, never feel like you hit your potential. I feel like that's where people should start first.
Yeah.
And finding their groove versus feeling like they have to monetize it and do their thing full time. And that's why it's like, I want to speak towards over glorifying being self-employed. Like there's so much shit you got to do leading up to it. And then the time and the structure and the management and having thick skin, being willing to be told no, being willing to like carve out time, handle curveballs, So like, this is why you're so important to be on the show, to show like it just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that when you first start out with your creative journey, you should absolutely only be doing it for your own creative fulfillment. Putting that monetization thing on it, oh my gosh, I feel like that really just puts a damper on everything, because
suffocates
now
the joy.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, you're spending time thinking, oh, what would sell, as opposed to what actually like puts my like heart on fire for the work that I'm doing. So it's definitely a really good thing to just do that. The 100-day project actually for me led me to realizing from that. And then I think I did another series of work after that. That was when I looked back and saw that my pattern was a lot of food. I actually did not know that while I was doing it until I looked back at my work. And I feel like you can't do that unless you're just cranking out work that you just love. And then once you look back at that series that you've made, you can see, oh, this is actually what I really love, and then capitalize on that and move forward from there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Connecting the dots. Absolutely. And now you get hired to do food work.
Yep.
That's
pretty
insane,
cool.
But it's because you gave yourself time to just like nerd out. I love drawing pizza, cats, and outer space. I've been drawing it since I was a kid, and it just continues to show up in my work. If I was doing freelance, I guarantee I could get hired for stuff. I've done pizza work before. It was awesome, but coaching was where it was at for me. That's just a different lane. But let's talk about the educational side of things. Like you were really taking off with all these Procreate tips and stuff. Where is this new lane coming from? To me, it builds social proof. It builds credibility. It provides value in the form of like, know, trust. You're educating people. Where did this come from? Is it because people just ask you a million questions? You're like, okay, well, might as well just teach. You have this teaching background.
Yeah, definitely the teaching background plays into it. I've always enjoyed teaching. And when I was teaching middle school science, I think I was just teaching the wrong subject. And to a totally different population. I mean, they are definitely a different breed, middle school students. But the teaching background plays into it. And then I've always wanted to eventually teach more of the creative stuff. And I think it's because I had to spend so much time learning it on my own that I want to be able to pass on that knowledge to other people who are in that same situation. So, 2 years ago, when I was just starting out with my freelance work, I was doing a ton of work behind the scenes, just researching and figuring out what the heck am I doing with freelance and with lettering even. And now that I have a couple of years of experience, I'm realizing that's actually knowledge that I can pass on already. And I should do it now while it's still fresh before I forget it, and help people who are in that position about 2 years ago, overcome hurdles that I had to. And
so was it
hopefully it's not as hard for them.
Self-initiated, or were just like you started noticing a pattern of like, damn, everybody keeps asking me, how do I work in layers? How do you get this effect in your Procreate?
Yeah. The Procreate actually just came from me deciding to share about it, because when I find shortcuts like that, I get really excited, because it takes me a while to do my artwork. So I'm trying to find any shortcut I can to cut corners on the time that I'm spending making that art. And struggling in a software program like Procreate is time wasted. So anytime I figure out something new, I get really excited and I want to share it to the world. So I just kind of channeled that into TikTok, which is where it started out, so that I could have a place to, geek out about Procreate shortcuts.
There we go. Oh, look at this repurposing. Repurposing. And if you're listening to the audio, I have her Instagram up right now. And do you feel like that is like the kind of stuff that has been taken off the most for you is your educational content these days?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that has been resonating the most with people. And it's really nice to see that there's, a huge group of people out there who are really excited to geek out about Procreate stuff with me.
Oh my goodness. Look at your feed. I never noticed the gradient before.
Oh yeah. I decided to turn it into a rainbow gradient. It's funny because
crazy.
You were talking about.
Oh my God.
Well, see down here, there isn't.
You can see where that's like insane planning. So like editorial calendar is super important for you.
Yeah. And you know what? I learned about the editorial calendar through this project. So
which project?
The Hungrily Ever After project, which is why you are seeing a rainbow grid, because my book covers are all in a rainbow gradient. If you were to get the whole collection of books, you'd have a really nice rainbow gradient sitting on your bookshelf.
So I'm all about keeping the end in mind. So is the entire goal with this to really like get published one day? Is that like the main initiative? Here's my idea, but here's the end goal.
To just show book publishing companies that I have the ability to make an illustration.
Self-initiated side projects. Yeah. This is what it's about. Students of mine, everything else. This is exactly what I talk about. So you just take it on steroids. So not everybody has to have an insane grid. That's color scheme. This takes a lot of proper planning, and you only have 2 to 5 hours in a day. You are insane. Yeah, but that just shows like you can maximize your time.
You totally can. And it's Instagram, right? We're only seeing just a surface level of what's happening in our lives. And I just decided I don't have as much time, this year to make anything. So it looks like a ton of work, but it's actually just 18 pieces of artwork with a lot of repurposing generated out of that. And then filming the educational videos is working your creative mind in a totally different way. And I found out that making those videos actually was a lot easier to do when I already had artwork from previous years to, pick up on and use as examples.
Just tons of repurpose, remix, and Frankenstein is what I like to call it.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So like, how much of your time in a week is like spent on content prepping? Like I get so swamped now with coaching takes up like 70% of my time. Podcast is 20% of the time. And then content creation these days, like I am trying to like reinvent a new strategy for my content because I'm just so busy in other worlds,
Yeah. Are you talking about like actually making the content or planning out what the content will be?
Let's just do like, do you plan like a weekly strategy? Do you plan your post for a week, or are you planning like a month in advance for your gradient?
Yeah. So with the side project, I realized if I spent the time up front, it was just days outside on the deck while my kids were like doing their water play and I had my laptop like off to the side, just kind of typing away. If you can put that planning up front, you can plan out months in advance. So once I use
like Panoli or Tailwind, or do you have?
Yeah, for the project, I use Google Calendar and an Excel spreadsheet. It was very simple, nothing automated. I think I can actually maximize my time once I figure out how to do those automation tools.
I use Google Sheets for my editorial calendar, so.
Yeah, it works. It totally works.
But I also like Panoli just so I can see my grid,
Yeah, so I recently migrated my stuff over to Notion, and I found that there's some cool ways to use linked databases to basically populate your content calendar in a calendar format, but go to individual pages where you can see, here's my content for TikTok, here's my content for Instagram, and then shift your data where you can see, here's what it looks like in progress as like a Kanban board from like doing to done.
Does it show like your grid though, so you can see what your visual is looking like?
It won't show my grid. So I've been using Later to plan out what my visual grid looks like. And sometimes I just use Photoshop because I don't have to export JPEGs to upload to a different platform. I just pop it in there, copy and paste.
I would love to see your tips on Notion if you have like a video or something, because I use Notion, but it's more for like my big picture moving items. Here's my completed, on the back burner, in progress, upcoming kind of stuff. And then my idea generation list. But I got all my students on Notion, but I don't even use it to like its full impact.
Oh my gosh.
That. Yeah. I haven't just like nerded out and given myself time. So I would love to know more about that. But right there, Panoli, Later, Notion are 3 things that I'll be linking up in the resources.
Preview too is a good one.
What is it?
Preview. I was using Preview before Later. I kind of jump between the two because
I was using preview before, later.
I know. I see what you did there. That was unintentional for me.
That was you.
But yeah, so preview I think is a little simpler to start out with if you are brand new to tools like later in preview, and then later is better once you get, a little bit more into it.
Okay. And so content strategies. I mean, we're talking about so much stuff here. I want to talk about like the next phase. You got another like side initiative project because people struggle with their colors, choosing your colors. And like, that's really hard for me. I'm like a black and white default guy. That's like always been my bias, monochromatic. And finally I'm like, you know what? I just need like a color palette to rock. I can still do my black and white work. I went to like Color Cafe or Topia Tones. I found a set and I've just been rocking with it for that, for my personal and podcast. It's been a lifesaver for me, but I'm just not like a super explosive, colorful person like you are. So I struggle with colors. Tell me about like your next side pursuit that you're building.
Yeah. So after, working on this side series of just making this colorful rainbow gradient on my grid, it forced me to utilize a lot of different color palettes in a lot of different ways and applying it in different contexts. So I am working with my friend Huyen at Miss Huyenden on Instagram. She's great. You should follow her. She's all about pastels. And we are creating this resource that we want to offer to other artists because we get that same question a lot. How do I use colors? How do I pick colors? How come it looks weird on my grid? Or, I just can't find anything that's consistent that feels like me. We've both gone through that process and have gone through that struggle as well. And we want to create a resource that gives artists the ability to pick their own color scheme without feeling overwhelmed of all the color theory that goes into colors, because it makes our head hurt to like look at the color wheels and talk about analogous, monochromatic, triadic color schemes.
And yep.
Yeah. And there's like a math to it. We're actually presenting a different way or a different approach to it, and pulling on just your feelings behind the work that you're trying to create and how you feel about the work and how you want your audience to feel. And we have a different approach that we're working on that, artists can go through to create their own color palette.
So I know when this comes out, this may not be ready, but is there like things leading up to it or a wait list? Is it a freebie? Is it a purchase? What can people expect? Or are you dropping like tips along the way on your Instagram where people can just like start soaking up some gold in the meantime?
Yeah, so we are currently preparing it behind the scenes, so working on that content. And once we decide on our release, we're thinking early summer, maybe more June than, I can't remember what I said the original date was, but probably around June time, you will start to see us share more tips. So you'll get free tips on colors of just like the basic essentials of things. And then it will be a paid resource. So sign up for a newsletter and you can get.
Where can people sign up for the newsletter to get updates so I can include that?
You can sign up for my newsletter on my website, belindakou.com.
How important has email been for you? Because email is like, I'd rather have my email list than my Instagram following.
Yeah, email is a new venture for me. So I started it up last year, which is a big win for me. I was like, I have a newsletter. I sort of have figured out MailChimp, and let's start sending things out every month or so. So that is something that I am working on this year a little bit more, is just kind of building up the content that I can share that is useful through email and kind of figuring out what to share that way. But yeah, I'm still figuring it out.
Holler if you have questions. You can help me with Notion, and I can get you set up with emails and nurture sequences and
that'd be great.
and headlines and copywriting. That's my playground these days. Like, I'd rather like write emails than draw, which is weird. This is weird.
Yeah. I've actually been feeling that way too. I've been in more of a writing mood than a drawing mood lately. Yeah, so that's why I've been
shift. To me, that's like
more.
The next level is coming out because you write more outlines these days. You're prepping more educational content. So the writing side is like,
you're doing a lot more
out of you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the thing is like, you kind of realize as an artist on social media, you can't say I'm not a copywriter, which is what I've been saying for a really long time, because I'm like, actually, you have to make captions. Yeah. Oh, you're a lettering artist. You are doing your lettering copy, So you got to get better at it. And I'm hoping that I can kind of work on that skill a little bit more through my educational materials, my blog posts, and my newsletter, and these resources that we'll be coming out with in the summer.
Writing is a superpower for artists. Like, writing is going to like help people connect on a deeper level with what you're doing from the visual side. Like the visual is the honey, but your writing is going to like capture their hearts and their minds. So let's pivot to some rapid fire. Being that you're a food lover, if you were on death row, what would your last slice of pizza be?
I've thought about this. So can it be a pizza and not a last slice? So if I were to request a pizza meal,
whatever you want.
Yeah. So I have 3 pieces, 3 different slices. I like variety. So one would be something, and the thing is I'm from Chicago, but I really like New York style pizza. So it has to be thin crust. Prosciutto with arugula would be one of them because I seem to like that combination. And then another slice needs to be a pizza directly from Italy because I had it one time and it was the most amazing pizza I've ever had before. And I want to try to taste that again before I were to die. And then the third one would be a slightly cold cheese pizza from Domino's because that was the craving that I had with my second kid.
Slightly cold. Okay. That was like the most unique trio of answers today. If you were reincarnated, what would your new career path be outside of being like a lettering artist? Teacher's already out in the back or the rear view mirror, and lettering artist, designer, that's gone too. What would it be?
Since we were talking about writing, I think I would actually be an author, but for fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to have this, I used to be, and maybe still am, really obsessed with Lord of the Rings. So I actually have like this, and now looking back at it, I'm like, that's a total Lord of the Rings knockoff, like story that I wanted to write back in the day when I was really inspired by that movie. And I was like, I think I want to write a fantasy story. So maybe an author, like a fantasy author.
Okay, that's cool. I wouldn't have guessed that. I was like waiting for chef. I was waiting for a chef.
No, I like to eat food. I don't like to cook it.
All right, cool. Where do you see yourself in like the next 5 years? What's the carrot you're chasing? If you and me were having a conversation, what would be like, yo, this is what I've done and I'm proud of? For me, it'd be like, yo, I'm an author of 2 best-selling books. Yeah.
That sounds nice. An author of 2 best-selling books. Also, more of an educator. So I would like to have...
Non-fiction in my world, though. Non-fiction.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, for me too. Now that I'm in this world. I think it would be great to offer more educational resources. So whether that is in book format of teaching lettering artists how to, level up their lettering styles, or online courses, I think would be really great.
I can see the course route. So like educational services, man, I could see you speaking at places, cool. Teaching like workshops at conferences. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like that's all sooner than a 5-year kind of thing for you.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. I think it's right around the corner for you. I swear. I feel it. Do you believe in aliens or life forms existing outside of our solar system?
I have to say, I can't say no. That's my answer.
Okay. Pizza rolls, pizza bagels, or Hot Pockets?
Pizza rolls.
Pizza rolls? What kind?
Yes. Supreme.
Supreme. Oh, gangster. All right. At the end of the day, what is like your go-to food?
My go-to food would probably be ramen.
Ramen? Like the normal packs you can get at Walmart, or like is there a fancier version?
When you say end of the day, do you mean just like my end of the day at home?
Like if you had one choice to eat one food, that's all you could pick. It's always on your mind. Gosh. That's your go-to. To me, it's like, okay, a pepperoni pizza for sure. Yep. Absolutely. What kind of ramen?
I like Shin ramen. It's like my comfort food. And it's the kind that comes in the packet and it's super spicy. And if you just like cook that with an egg and put in some green onions, it's really good. Yeah. Although I'm like saying this in an imaginary world because it's not very healthy for you. So I wouldn't eat it for the rest of my life. But if I need some comfort food, I'll eat that.
Some comfort food. That's fine.
Yeah.
Where can people go to follow you online and support you?
You can follow me at Belinda Kou everywhere, but most prominently on Instagram and TikTok. And if you're interested in getting educational resources, then my website at belindaskou.com, sign up for my newsletter.
Well, I'm really, really stoked that we had a chance to make this happen finally. And I appreciate all the knowledge and the dimes and the value you just dropped today. This is going to definitely help other people take themselves more seriously with their side hustles and level up. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Thanks again for listening. It'd be awesome if you took the time to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and let the comment below so we can connect. Again, if you want to catch a shout out as a future listener of the week, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes and give it a rating and review.